Hi, I'm Kara and welcome to Camp, where college applications are made perfect. We're going to be talking about a lot of super important information in today's video. So as always, I have timestamped the main subjects down below so you can skip to specific moments, and I'm going to be including links so you can do additional research at home. Today is going to be all about timelines. So we're going to talk about when to start asking for letters of recommendation, when to be taking the ACT, SAT tests, when to start writing your college essay, and a lot of other things that fall into the timeline for applying to college. Let's get into it. First, we're going to talk about some common abbreviations you will see as you are applying to college. These are ED, EA, and RD. ED means that when you apply to a college, you are locked in. I would advise that you do not go with this option. Some say that it will help you with admission rates, but I believe it just encourages the college to offer you fewer scholarship money because they know that you're going to go there. And if you do get rejected, which does happen, then you have fewer options for other places to go. Many colleges will try to entice you into this by saying that there's a much higher chance of you getting into the school, but my advice would be don't do it. On the other hand, there is EA, which stands for early application. So it's important to know the difference between early application and early decision, because early application is the path that I suggest pretty much everyone who's applying to college go down. It makes you a much more competitive applicant. It shows that you're excited and passionate about the school you're applying to, and most competitive colleges pull nearly exclusively from their EA application pool. So what is EA? Essentially, EA just means that you have your application submitted, your letters of recommendation in, and all your supplemental writings written by around November of your senior year. So your school will have an EA deadline, and if they do have an EA deadline, they'll communicate that deadline to you, and you just have to hit it. So I'm going to build this timeline in this video with the EA deadline in mind, and that just means that if things don't go according to plan, or if you can't get anything done in time, then you have the regular decision deadline to fall back on. Finally, there is RD, or regular decision. So this application deadline is usually around the beginning of January, so it gives you about 2 additional months to work on your application. However, this method of applying is looked upon a little bit less favorably by colleges. So what is the timeline that I recommend? Well, here it is. First, I would get started on asking about letters of recommendation in spring of your junior year. So there's kind of a whole process to this, and we are going to talk about it more at the end of the video, but that's when I would start working on that. Second, I would make sure you're taking the SAT and ACT a number of times, but try to take them for the last time by July between your junior and senior years. I would also recommend you start writing your college essay in spring of your junior year and try to have it looked over and pretty much perfected by June or July between your junior and senior years. In that same time, I would also be working on a college resume. So a lot of colleges require a sort of specialized resume, and we're actually going to have a whole video about them later on in this series. But it's important to be working on the resume at the same time as the essay because it'll help remind you of things that you've done and activities that you were really passionate about. Finally, you need to start looking at the actual application portals. So start looking at Apply Texas around August or July between junior and senior years, and Common App starting in September. A lot of the applications will have supplemental writings for certain schools, so it's important you start looking as early as possible so you can have as much time as possible to get those supplemental writings done. Both the college resume and the college essay are getting their own camp video. So in this video, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the SAT, ACT tests and letters of recommendation. First, let's talk about letters of recommendation. So you should be asking your teachers if they'd be willing to write you letters of recommendation around spring of your junior year. So they're not actually going to write the letter at this time. This will just sort of get the idea into their heads so that they're paying attention to you and looking for things to write about come application time. This allows your letter to be a lot more personalized and more meaningful. Who should you ask for the letter of recommendation? So you should ask 2 of your core class teachers, so that's history, science, math, or reading, and 1 extracurricular teacher, such as a band director or a beloved coach. You should also have 1 or 2 additional teachers just sort of in the back of your mind. You probably won't need to ask them for a letter of recommendation, but just in case you do, you should have some additional options. You will likely never get to read what these teachers write about you. So the whole point of the letter of recommendation is that it's supposed to be pretty private. So make sure the teachers that you're picking are going to say good, meaningful things about you as a student and as a person. I'm going to walk you through the actual application system, so like step by step how to apply in the next video, and there we will talk a little bit more about this, but the way that you submit the letters of recommendation will make the whole process super self-explanatory, super clear. The only thing I want to make sure you know is to check the box to waive your right to see your letters of recommendation. So this makes admissions officer trust what they say a lot more and makes them put a lot more stock into these letters of recommendation. Finally, please make sure you tell your teachers before you send them a request for a letter of recommendation. It annoys teachers to no end when they just get random requests from students. Make sure you talk to your teacher about the request. Make sure they know that they're looking for you and the things that you've done before you send them the request through the application portal. The SAT versus the ACT. So which test is going to be the best fit for you? In general, if you prefer and feel like you are better at math, the SAT, which has 2 math sections, is going to be your best fit. In contrast, the ACT, which has 2 reading/writing sections, a math section, and then a science section, is a better fit for people who are better at reading, because the science section is essentially just a reading section with STEM-based concepts. In the end though, the easiest way to tell which test is going to be the best fit for you is to take them both. Do not get caught up in thinking, oh, I'm gonna hate the ACT or I'm gonna hate the SAT, because you could be cheating yourself out of a better score. Another thing is that it's good to do practice tests online to kind of get a feel, but you should take both of them in person at least once, because you never know how you're going to perform until you're actually doing it under pressure. Finally, you can take the tests as many times as you want. If you're unhappy with your first score, take it again. I always recommend that you take each of these tests at least twice, and you can always pay to send your highest score to your colleges. They never have to know. The last thing I'm going to touch on super quickly are extracurriculars. So extracurriculars are really important to the application process, but they really vary a lot from person to person. So the first thing I want to note is that when admissions officers are looking at your application, they're going to value quality over quantity. So even if you only do a few things, as long as you were like the officer in your club and you devoted a lot of time to an organization, or if you were the captain of your school team, they are going to note that, and that is going to have quite a bit of value. However, they also do want some quantity. So just try to strike a balance between the two. Don't just do one thing and only that thing, but don't do a million things and barely participate in any of them. The second thing I want to touch on is that volunteer hours are important. You should be seeking out those volunteer opportunities in your community wherever you can, even if it's something small. Make sure you're thinking about it, make sure you're putting it on resumes, make sure you're writing it down. You want to be volunteering as much as you possibly can. Finally, clubs. Clubs and organizations can be a little nerve-wracking to join. So my biggest advice would be join with a friend. They can hold you accountable, you can go to club meetings together, and even if you're not having fun in the club, you should almost always be having fun with your friends. So just holding each other accountable, making things more enjoyable, that would be my recommendation for getting started. Another thing is make sure that you join clubs that you're passionate about. Make sure you use them as ways to make your voice heard. Make sure you're excited about the clubs that you're joining. It'll give you something different, something that isn't just NHS or student council that a lot of high achieving students will have on their resumes. I hope this video helped you think a little bit more about the things that you can be doing now to be getting ready for college. This is a pretty early timeline, so if you feel like you're way behind or you've missed a bunch of these benchmarks, that's totally okay. Everyone moves at their own pace. I just set an earlier timeline because the fewer things you have to do during the thick of application season, the better. And I want to make sure that sophomores and juniors know that this stuff is coming up. I also wanted to remind you that there are links in the description box for things like SAT, ACT study guides and additional resources on this subject. Thank you guys so much for coming to camp.